everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Future Contracts. Today, I have the pleasure to be speaking to Joost Bokhorst. I hope I said that correctly, Joost. Joost is a senior legal counsel at CyberArk, which is a technology company, and Joost will be talking about that a bit more. And you're based in the Netherlands, is that right?
That is correct, yes. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Joost, tell us
Yes.
a bit more about your background. How did you get to CyberArk?
Yeah, so starting from the beginning, without diving into too much details, I actually started in-house my career. Then I switched to private practice, and then I moved back again in-house. And that has been almost 5 years ago when I joined CyberArk, which is a cybersecurity company. And I'm in the go-to-market team, as we call it, the legal go-to-market team. So basically, my job is to support sales in any obstacles they are facing, which are mainly, of course, receiving questions from customers and negotiating contracts with them.
That sounds like if you were a doctor, you'd be in the ER, in the emergency room, just like dealing with all the instant stuff that you need to be dealing with.
Yeah, I think I don't want to say my job is as important as the people at the ER, but I think it does have some overlap. Maybe with the biggest exception that we have some kind of quarterly cycles. So we know when things are getting busy towards the end of the quarter. And then we look forward to having a little bit of downtime at the start of a new quarter.
Yeah. How many people are in your team?
So the entire legal team is around 50 people today. And in the go-to-market team globally, I think we have towards 20 in total.
Yeah, that's quite a robust team for a cybersecurity company. I think you see lots of teams that are so just tiny, like two people that are managing a whole organization. And how large is CyberArk? How many employees do you have?
So we currently have around 4,000 employees. And maybe interesting to point out, when I joined CyberArk about 5 years ago, I think we had around 2,000 employees and around 15 lawyers in total. So the legal team has been growing together with the company. So our biggest challenge basically is to keep up with the company.
Yeah. And you've been on the scene looking at technology and innovation in the legal space. And you and I met during the One NDA project, and then later you were involved in One SaaS, and you were a great addition to the team. And you really got the concept and what we were trying to achieve, it was great to have you. And since then, we've had lots of conversations around technology, your use of it, how you went about introducing technology into your team. What was the moment in which you thought, I need technology? What was it driven by?
But that's a very good question. I think it started very rudimental. So when I joined CyberArk, I noticed that we had certain templates that were longer than they necessarily needed to be. So we actually started to create lighter versions of those templates. So that's a very rudimental approach to speed up the way we can support the business. And those are easy wins, low-hanging fruit. So that's a relatively easy thing to start with. And then as you progress, you'll see that the points where there is still room for improvement become more complicated. And I think that is the point where technology comes in and can really bring you to the next level of your efficiency and transformation as a legal department.
So what was the first bit of tech that you bought?
So the first bit of tech where I was actually involved from start to end in the entire purchase journey was a tool to help review contracts.
And what did it do? Was it to make the actual review, or was it like the workflow management of it? Because now the tools are AI native, so you have this ability of reviewing contracts in that way. But if this was a while ago, what did that technology look like?
So it was already sort of AI driven, maybe just not in a generative AI sense. So the way it worked is that it was able to connect the relevant parts of your playbook to a clause in a contract.
Hmm.
So instead of having to go through your playbook and find the relevant page, basically, it would automatically insert or comment the information from the playbook as relevant.
Right. Okay. And how did you go about deciding which technology vendor to go with? What was the process?
That's always a very challenging one. I would say, especially today with so many legal technology vendors, um, you usually just start browsing. You go to a conference like Legal Geek, for example, and start to get a feeling of what's out there. And then hopefully you find something that excites you, and then you're going to do a demo or many demos with different vendors to get a better insight in what exactly they are capable of doing. And then usually we down select to one or two vendors and we run a POC with them. And that's basically the point where you see, okay, those things were working fine in the demo, but during the POC, they are a little bit more challenging and they might not be always as smooth as we've seen them on screen. So I would say, especially during the POC phase, we usually approach that almost as a user acceptance test. So we make sure that before we go in, we know exactly what we want to get out of the product. So we have a list of features that we want to ensure are available and are working properly. And that is quite a lot of time investment. So one of the challenges that you see is that by the time you get to the end of your selection procedure, the vendors or products that have not made the list may already have new upgrades, improved features, and you would almost tend to start over again and again and again without deciding which vendor to go with. So to me, it almost feels like, especially when you're looking into very new technology, it almost feels like picking which train to jump on and then just hope that it will bring you to your station, but you're never completely sure.
Do you think that's the right approach in hindsight?
Um, in hindsight, it's not the perfect approach, but I don't see a better one, to be honest, because otherwise you keep repeating a cycle of testing and testing and testing. And one of the things with software, which people sometimes do not see or understand, is that it will never be perfect. But for some reason, for example, when we're looking at Microsoft Office, for example, I'm still struggling on a weekly basis with layout in Word or Outlook not being able to find an email I'm pretty sure is in my inbox, but it's just not able to dig it up. Or Excel, which is just a mess to me, but it's probably more of a user error, I guess. But for some reason, we all have accepted that Microsoft Office is not perfect, but it's still better than picking up a pen, writing on a piece of paper, bringing it to the postal office, and wait a couple of days until it gets to the recipient. But at least what I noticed, when we're looking into adopting new technology, shiny technology that has been presented to us as top notch, the expectation rises that it's going to be perfect, but it's not. It's software. Software is never perfect. That's why it's being updated always. So I think an important part is also managing your own expectations, but even more importantly, probably managing the expectations of the team, of the people that are actually going to use the software. And that brings me back to my point to avoid testing and not deciding, because then it will never bring you to the next stage.
Yeah. How do you build, because there's so many unknowns at the beginning of a vendor selection process, how do you know what you need to do to build a business case for legal tech? What are the things that you need to know to get the money?
Yeah, yeah, that is a challenging one. Always, I would say, especially because if you're building a business case, you're going to focus on return on investment, which is of course the outcome of your business case. I would say before you start focusing on return of investment, it is time to start focusing on where is room for improvement. And in order to know where room for improvement is, you need to know where you're spending your time on. So you would actually need to start collecting, gathering data, statistics, analytics on where are you spending your time on. Are you signing 200 customer contracts a year, 300 NDAs, 500 other types of documents? Then you start to get a feeling of, okay, this is where we're spending our time on. There's also a risk that you want to go into too much detail getting that metadata. So my approach usually is to be a little bit more pragmatic when it comes to the details. So I don't want our team to keep track of billable hours as we all did in private practice, because that's, in my opinion, just a waste of time for an in-house counsel. But you can ask the team, how long does it usually take you to review an NDA? And you can do a little survey. You can let them choose between 30, 60, 90 minutes. And then you get an average and you have an estimate. And based on that estimate, you can multiply it with the number of contracts that you're processing every year of that certain type. And that is when you have more visibility on how much time are you spending on, for example, which type of contract or which type of request that's coming in from the business. And then it's time to look into, okay, how are we going to improve it and how much time is that going to save us? And that's when you get to the point where you can start building a business case that looks like we're spending this much time now. If we have the improvement, we're going to reduce the time spent with X. That means the legal team is spending less time, and that basically makes everyone happy. Now, the sad but probably honest truth is that no one outside legal cares if lawyers are happy or not.
Yes.
So if you're building your business case and you're focusing on the return on investment, you need to make sure that the outcome resonate with the business people, with the executive team, or whoever is going to look at your business case, and especially the people that are deciding on your business case. So you need to make that translation from time saved on legal hours to what does it mean for the business. For example, if we can make this improvement, legal is no longer involved and you can just go without having to wait on legal, and that will shorten your deal cycle. It means you can close contracts quicker. You can pull revenue from Q3, from the third quarter into the second quarter. And then it starts to resonate with the business stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice and just a great insight, because often when you're building a business case for budget for anything, you focus very much on how it affects you internally. But actually, what you really need to be mindful of is what the business strategy is, what the objectives are of the person that you're asking to give you budget. And then you need to tailor your message so that it lands with them, but also has a bigger business impact. And I think that's where a lot of it gets lost, because it's hard to do that as well when you're not fully involved in what the business is doing and when you're not sort of bedded into what's going on around you, which often lawyers are because they're silent. How do you get that information? How do you position yourself as a business unit so that you have the transparency that's required so that you can then go and build these business cases?
Also a challenging one. So I don't have a cut and paste answer that will work for every type of business or every company culture. What's really important is creating a close business relationship with your internal clients. So I would say you need to be approachable, and you need to try and help them without judgment, even if in some cases that's challenging. But you're there to help and not to judge. That's my opinion. And yes, we do need to in some way protect the company, and that means we need to sometimes follow strict rules or policies, and sometimes need to be strict. But we always need to keep in mind that even though we're in different teams and departments, we all have the same goal, and that is making the company that we work for grow. And that's what we're here to support. And I think if you are able to make the business understand that you're there to help and not to delay them or to annoy them, then hopefully you get a better feeling of what's out there to improve. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I agree.
It's a tricky one because you're not directly revenue generating. So often when you have demands, like, you say that this is with legal, but actually it's with the business because we didn't get the information that we needed up front, for example. It's hard for you to kind of drive that and, yeah, make demands because the salesperson's objectives or agenda is often going to be kind of paramount within the organization. And I think there is the narrative around, being approachable and trying to help and kind of being there for them. But I think there's another angle as well, which is also to challenge when things aren't the way they should be with the business, which I think is very hard to do. But when you get yourself into that position and you are challenging decisions that are being made around you that have that larger strategic impact without fear of judgment from the other side towards you, then I think that's also an important factor when it comes to your impact in an organization.
Yeah, I fully agree. Maybe just to give an example. So we were focusing on creating a business case, and that by itself is already a project and takes up a lot of time. Now, and that's where I circle back to where I mentioned I tend to take sometimes a more pragmatic approach. So if, for example, legal is reviewing any kind of procurement contract, marketing is hiring a venue or catering or something alike, you can invest a lot of time in keeping track of the data, be as detailed as possible, create an enormous business case. But you could also raise the question, like you mentioned, and challenge the premise or question the premise and ask yourself or ask the business, are you personally engaging and paying for a lawyer if you're renting a venue or a hotel room or go to a restaurant with a larger company of people? The answer is no. So you might want to think, okay, but why is the company then doing that? Because they were there 24, not 24/7, but we're there quite often. So people tend to forget that we're being paid as well. And that means we're being paid to review a contract that might be worth like 1 or 2 thousand euros or pounds or dollars. And that's not the best time of a lawyer. So yeah, I totally agree. It's also a matter of having the room to actually question the things that you're doing, and should we be doing them like we are, or maybe even should we be doing them at all?
Yes, totally. Um, on your technology purchases kind of experience, where have you seen those go wrong?
I don't think I have seen like one specific reason where it went wrong specifically. It's probably more a combination of things. First of all, it can be the technology. It, like I said, even as hard as you try to determine this is the technology that's 100% tailored to your needs, you're never sure. And especially if you want to adopt early new technology, you have to take for granted that it's not perfect, as I tried to explain. Um, then when it comes to timing, for example, there's never a perfect time to transform the way people have been using for often for years. And that brings me to, while I'm explaining, thinking of it, which what might be the biggest challenge is adoption by the users. So what I've seen as a pitfall in my own experience is if you're diving into details, you're browsing through the market, you're seeing that many demos, you've done a POC, you've done testing, you've done the implementation, you're sure this is what we need and you know exactly how it works. And then you go live and people don't start using it. that means you haven't thought about adoption at an early enough stage. And I've seen teams of very bright, ambitious, and progressive lawyers that still struggle to adopt. And that might be in the nature of being a lawyer. And I think I can say that because I'm a lawyer myself, and I'm painfully aware that I also like to do the things the way I'm used to doing it. So that's a tricky one. And then on the other hand, lawyers are pretty much always busy, so they need to find time to actually get to understand the new software or technology or transformative approach. And what you often see is that the things that are urgent are not important, and the things that are important are not urgent. So you're being chased by sales for a lot of things, and yes, there is important stuff there, but a lot of things could wait a little bit longer. And then on the other end of the spectrum, getting to know a new piece of technology that will, when you have invested the time to make it your own, will bring you great benefits, can always wait because you're already doing the job a certain way. It's not the most efficient way, but it is working. So that's definitely a struggle to find the time to adopt new technology.
I mean, I hear that all the time, that even if the tech's great and the timing's great and you've got senior sponsorship and the CEO is saying legal must adopt AI, as an example, it's still really hard to get people to do it. And it still shocks me when I hear people say, we've bought this tool, but no one uses it. Because I think that's horrible for you, because you've just been through this enormous journey trying to test it, do the POC, get the ROI drafted up and documented, pitch that to your CFO, get the budget, negotiate with the vendor. Now the technology's in, and it's like people aren't using it. It's just so heartbreaking. How do you overcome that, though? What do you do to make sure that that doesn't happen?
I think an important part, so there are different bits and pieces. I think an important part is to engage the users early on. So you need to engage them finding a problem that's theirs that we're going to solve. So they know that you are trying to solve one of their problems. And we're not just adopting technology for the sake of doing something new because we're bored, because we have time to spend. So that's step one. Then the second, I would say, is manage expectations. And again, that ties in with people thinking that software is perfect, but also they may have a wrong understanding of what the technology is capable of. And more importantly, what it's not capable of. So people may expect, okay, this is going to be life-changing and it will do all the work for me. But instead, you will still need to do quite a lot of the work, but it will go faster and it will be easier. And I think as long as you have you have the expectations set right, that really helps, because then people are not, hopefully they are not disappointed. That also means telling them transparently, there are still bugs, because we are early adopters here. So we are sticking our necks out, and that means we are purchasing a product that's not 100% developed yet, but there are good enough reasons not to wait and maybe miss this opportunity. And then when it's to summarize or actually move on to my last and final point, when it is live, people need to get to know the product and know how to work with it. And that's something I'm still struggling with, in all honesty. Usually the vendor offers, or you pay the vendor to do training for a team. And then let's say you invite 20 or 30 people for a 1 hour online training, and then half of them are not able to join because they have to prioritize something else, which means they have to watch the recording, which means they have to find time to watch the recording. And if they do, they will speed it up 5 times while answering emails. and pinging on Teams, and it will not teach them anything. It will not stick. And actually, the same goes, and I'm guilty of that as well. Even the people that tune in for the training are still distracted by emails, Teams messages,
Of course.
etc. And I personally find it difficult to learn from just watching and seeing. So whenever I see a training, and then maybe next week I'm finally going to use the product myself for the first time, I completely forgot about the training.
You did. Yeah.
And that's very challenging. And again, I don't have a solution for that, because what I did try is doing one-on-one sessions, and that has been working very well, even with the people that had already done the general training. They said, "Oh, now I know it works like this," and that was explained during the training, but it just didn't stick. I think one-on-one training sessions is a very good way, but it's not scalable, and it might not be feasible. And I haven't found a solution that's somewhere in the middle that will really help adoption. Still contemplating.
And I think that, I mean, it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily need to be scalable, because once they're bought in, then they can just get on with it. Because once you understand the value of it, and once you make it part of your workflow, you then become familiar with the tool, and it's easy for you to just dive in and find out better ways of using it yourself. And there's lots of trial and error that will happen once you're comfortable with it. I think it's that first bit when you've introduced it, and now they have to get over the mental barrier that they have to change the way they're working. And these might be the same people that have been complaining for years on end about how much they hate reviewing NDAs. And yet when you give them a solution, they find it mentally difficult. And they're probably challenged by their own appetite for this. They're going, hold on, I really hate this, but I also hate this, which is change. I hate change more than I hate NDAs. And so I'm not going to go over that barrier to try and figure out how to solve the initial problem. And I think that's something that I think about a lot. And I think about adoption, and how do you get a product to be sticky, and how do you get people to fall in love with your tool or become addicted to it, because Microsoft Word, everyone hates, but everyone's on it, right? So
Exactly.
how do you create that? And and this has always taken me back to my days of GDPR compliance, which might sound weird, but I used to be a data protection lawyer, and I used to then offer consultancy services to companies that wanted to become compliant with GDPR. And one of the principles of GDPR is privacy by design. And we always kind of debated how this can happen. One of the ways that we found was the most successful was to make people accountable who weren't directly involved in the project, so that they would be the points of contact within sub-teams. So we had like GDPR champions or ambassadors, and we'd get this small team and we would make it exclusive, and we'd train them up, and we'd do one-on-ones with them, and we'd get them really, on board with what it is that we were trying to achieve. And these people were not lawyers, right? So the same way your lawyers are not tech wizards. So you would get them, you'd really train those guys up, you'd make them accountable, you'd make it part of their job spec, they get measured on it at the end of the year. HR knows that that's part of their remit. So it's kind of like an official part of their job. And then from there, it was their responsibility to be the point of contact for anyone who had queries. And they kind of were, they had the ownership and the remit to create their own structures almost as to how they're going to get these people onboarded. And that I found worked really well. Now, the problem is, if you have a fast growing tech scale up, which was the sort of company that I used to work with, these people churn, right? So you get these ambassadors and they get trained up and then they're gone, and now you've got to do it again. So this is another problem, but perhaps a smaller one than having this central accountability that sits with the person that drove the decision making of the purchase. And now you've not only just done that, now you're responsible for the whole adoption journey. But it is definitely, in my view, the biggest challenge over and above technology capability or getting the budget. I think adoption is, in my experience at least, just been just the hardest and the messiest.
I agree. I agree.
So having said all that, who really owns the buying decision? Is it legal? Is it IT? Is it procurement? Is there clarity around who decides what's going to be bought?
It's a very legal answer, but it depends. So
Depends, right?
it depends. It depends where the budget lies, which can be either by legal directly or it can be by IT. But I would say, regardless of budget, the most important thing, and that also circles back to adoption, is that the actual buying decision should be very user driven or user based. Because you can have an IT department owning the budget and then dictating the legal team that they need to start using a new tool, but they don't know exactly the ins and outs of how a legal team works. So, in my opinion, they are usually not in a position to know what's best for the user, whether that's legal or finance or HR or someone else. I think it needs to come from the user. And I'm not saying that IT should not be involved. You can have a very, very good relationship with IT, and it will definitely bring you forward because those people know a whole lot of things about IT software, how to use it, sometimes also what's available in the market, the tools that are already available within the company and that might be used in a different way to start catering to the needs from the legal team. But if you really want to make sure that the adoption is going well, then you need to start focusing on the users, and that's the legal team. So I think the legal team should be, in the end, deciding what they need. And then together with IT, you can start working on making sure that it's going to fulfill those needs. And I would say at the very end, that's where the procurement team comes in, and they need to make sure that they have the lowest pricing, the shortest SOAs, and the most favorable terms to engage or onboard the new vendor.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been on kind of both sides of the fence, and you never quite know where the decision lies. And I think it depends on who is making the final decision and who's got the biggest influence. And then vendors can be more helpful. What can vendors do to be more helpful in your adoption journey?
Also a good question. I don't think I've seen very good examples yet. So I guess vendors are also struggling with adoption, but it might not be their main problem, or at least the people that you're speaking with, it might not be their main problem because they just want to onboard you as a new customer. And then afterwards, they hope to keep you as a customer, but that's not the initial focus. So I think it is also a lack of focus, which comes together with a lack of resources because everyone is busy selling their software, and then that's simply what they need to do first. Again, I don't know is maybe the answer. Like they are more than willing to offer training sessions, to hear us out if we have any complaints, maybe even try to reconfigure the software. But so far, I haven't seen a very good example where I think like, okay, this is the solution to the challenge that we have with adoption. And that might also be because every company has their own challenges with adoption. They have their own teams, they have their own company culture, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. Have you seen any good examples or something you're preaching and practicing yourself?
I think the one of the things that some vendors have done is try to almost be too creative with the way that they've gone to market. So they've built products that completely veer away from where lawyers already are, because lawyers are under resourced and their priority is not to adopt technology. I mean, you might have one or two people in a legal team whose agenda is to make the team more efficient, or you might be lucky enough to have a legal ops director who wants that for the team. But often lawyers are just trying to get the job done, right? So, and I'm sure that's the same in many other functions as well. So I think just veering off totally from the platforms where they live and culturally, like Microsoft Word, for example, trying to create something that looks like Microsoft Word but isn't, has historically not gone down well within the legal ecosystem of technology buyers. I think that's one area. But I think people are now, or vendors rather, are moving away from that quite rapidly because they realize that, but also the technology is available to build really cool products that live natively in tools where lawyers already live. So that's one thing. The other thing is what you said. There's lots of pressure on the sale. The salesperson is motivated to just get the sale done. They are often remunerated based on the sales that they make. And then post sale, it kind of moves into a different team, which is onboarding. And I can tell you, the onboarding team isn't always happy with the sales team because they're like, what did you just say that we can do? Because this is difficult, impossible. We're not going to do it in time. And I think that, of course, vendors have their own pressures and they have their own issues of scalability because, to your point earlier, it's unscalable to train every single person individually to get them to onboard onto a tool. So you're trying to make a process that is inherently unscalable, scalable. I don't have the solution, by the way. I'm just talking through all the difficulties that the legal field has seen in adopting technology because it's a problem on both sides, right? And also lawyers are just used to doing things a certain way, and so when you're introducing something that is a big change, it's not an incremental change. That's problematic. So I think that my conclusion up until now, which will of course change as I learn more, is that you do need to be iterative with change and you need to start small and you need to have a very clear objective. I think often vendors go into it, they don't fully understand the client's requirements, they don't really understand what the main pain point is, they haven't done thorough enough discovery, and then they get to the implementation point and you're like, cool, so what are we going to do first? No, this should be planned out from the outset, and you should know that the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to tackle the NDA and get rid of it. Just adopt one NDA, you don't need to buy tech. But anyway, things like that, like what are your biggest problems and how are you going to solve them? They may be tech related, they may be part of a broader innovation project, but showing those quick wins and getting people to love those quick wins and build up the number of people that are advocating for the change, I think is key and something that we don't pay too much attention to because we're so busy with the selection process and the procurement and then going. So yeah, I think quick win, the right people, building your stakeholders, getting the support that you need from outside and inside the team early, as you mentioned earlier, are all key. But yeah, I will hopefully one day develop a methodology for this because I think that's the barrier to change within legal. It's adoption, it's not tech.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Let me know when you have the answer.
I'll let you know. You let me know as you learn more on this. And I know that you've bought tech in the past, you're in the process now of selecting new tech. If now that you have like a clean slate, what would you do differently compared to what you've done in the past?
Again, such a challenging question.
As today.
So, in hindsight, in a perfect world, you would start off with a very solid foundation. So you would be able to keep track of exactly what you're doing, how long does it take, how often am I doing it. And that means, I would say, having a very comprehensive CLM tool to start with, because that will create a foundation that will allow you to grow. And what I sometimes am seeing is that we are exposed to so many new types of technology and we're very eager to start using them, but we're missing the foundation to build from. So you're building a house that's about to collapse because the tools are not integrated, they're not communicating, people don't know how to use them. People have had 5 new tools in the last 2 years. So I think creating a foundation that really gives you the momentum to accelerate and skyrocket to new levels. But that is in hindsight in a perfect world. In the world where we live in, technology, including your foundations, are evolving constantly as well. So you might start building on one foundation, And then by the end, you get to the third or fourth level, your foundation is not suitable anymore for your top floor. And then you actually need to start all over again and need to think, okay, what kind of new foundation do I need then? And then you start building again and again and renewing. And so I think it's an endless journey, basically, which also makes it interesting and keeps it challenging. It's, yeah, you need to have quite a lot of stamina for it.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that hasn't sunk in with lots of legal teams. We are moving beyond doing things in an analog way. Now we're going to have to go into a position where we are fully tech/AI enabled. Whose job is that going to be? Because we hire lawyers into the team. I wonder whether the future of the legal team is much more multidisciplinary. And we've introduced the concept of legal ops, and you have legal engineers and legal AI solutions architects. So we have all these new roles that are coming to the fore. And I wonder whether the world of law and being part of an in-house team will require a much more diverse skill set in order to take the legal team forward in its current structure.
Yeah. I'm actually past the stage of wondering, especially the last year. In the last year, we've really taken off introducing new ways of working, automation, technology, AI. And I personally have been very eager to introduce something new, get it to work, and then move on to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. But what I noticed is that the ones that I already closed off still need updating, maintenance, training,
Yes.
and that piles up. So if I'm looking at my job today currently, it's definitely getting hybrid. So I'm still negotiating contracts, I'm still redlining, etc., etc. But in the meantime, I together with my team, of course, need to make sure that our playbook keeps updated. If we have a new template, we need to make sure it's part of the automated software cycle. We're trying to find new technology, and when we have implemented that, it needs updating as well, and new training. So it definitely, it is definitely evolving. And I agree. In the end, I think lawyers will be a lot more hybrid, or at least many of the lawyers will have more of a hybrid role. And it may even come to a point where you only have legal engineers that no longer negotiate contracts themselves, but have a full-time job on just making sure that the playbooks, the AI, the redlining, etc., is all updated constantly.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And that, legal ops up until now has felt more like a luxury or maybe not a necessity. But I think just as a business has a COO and it requires one to work and operate smoothly, you're going to need to have a similar role within each subdivision, particularly as we all buy our own tools that are specific to our area, legal included. You're going to need someone who understands those tools, how they are built into the DNA of the team, what interdependencies there are. That's a big job in and of itself. And in other divisions, you do have like FinOps in finance or marketing ops, and those are established roles within each of these teams. And I think
Yeah.
legal is just going to have to catch up, and that's going to happen very soon. But yeah, it's very exciting to see how it all evolves over the next few years. Joost, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope
Likewise.
you enjoy the rest of your summer. And for everyone who's listened in, thank you for being here, and stay tuned for the next episode of Future Contracts. Thanks very much.
Thank you.